Hello, guys. Good morning, everyone. Hello, hi, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Hello, Govind. I hope I'm audible as well as visible. Am I? Hello, guys. Hi, everyone. Good morning, Said. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Bharat. Walaikum salam, Najam. Good morning, Aravind. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. So we will wait 1 or 2 minutes for rest of the people to join. Not visible. I think I am. I've already turned on my camera. Good morning, Pradnya. Good morning. So there might be some network issue if I'm not wrong, because I can see that. Please, someone confirm whether I'm audible or not and also visible. So if there's any issue, I will try to reconnect or I will try to change my network. Please confirm quickly. Hello, Adil. Good morning, Manmohan. Good morning, everyone. Audible, not visible, so there's some network issue. Allow me a minute only. And in the meantime, let's wait for rest of the people to join. And then accordingly, we are going to start our class. So allow me a second only, and then we will start. So I can see people are joining. People are joining. So allow me a second, and then we will start. In the meantime, let me try to set up the environment because I think there's a network issue from my side because I have changed my location as of now. But I have changed my network. Let's hope it works fine. So let me set up the environment in the meantime. Meanwhile, it makes my network good. And currently, we are discussing our JavaScript. Currently, we are discussing our asynchronous JavaScript. And today's class is going to be one of the very important classes. Why? Because we are going to discuss something very important, and that is promises, right? Although we have already given an introduction, small introduction to the promises, and let's see how it goes. So, good morning, Shubham. Good morning, Sumit. Please confirm in the chat whether my screen is visible or not. Is my screen visible, guys? Allow me a second only, okay? Allow me a second. Hey, guys. Hi, everyone. Am I audible? Am I audible? And as well as visible, am I? Perfect. So, let me start sharing my screen. Please allow me a second. I hope my screen is visible, right? And I'm also visible as well. Perfect. Great. All good. Great. Okay. Okay. Looks like screen is stuck. No, it's not. I think it should be visible now because now I have shared my screen, Said, and I can see only 15 people are here. So where are rest of the people? I am not feeling well, but I think we can manage as of now, Govind. Let's just focus on the class only as of now, and let's try to understand most of the things that we are going to discuss in today's class. Shall we? Shall we start, guys? I think I can see only 15 people in the class, which is definitely not acceptable. So let's wait and let's text quickly in the WhatsApp group and ask people to join. Allow me a minute only. Good morning, Adarsh. Good morning. Okay. Good morning, Ankit. Good morning, Ankit. Perfect. Okay, I guess we can start. Shall we start, guys? Please give me a quick confirmation in the chat. Please put yes or no in the chat so that we can start with our class quickly. Shall we start? Perfect. Let's start. See, today's class is going to be one of the very important classes. There's a reason behind it. Why? Because when we talk about our web development always deals with huge set of data. Let me give you an example what we mean by huge set of data. Let's suppose I am on a website called as www.amazon.in. This is a simple website that we have, right? And let me try to open up any section here. Let's suppose mobile phones. And we can clearly see that there are hundreds of thousands of mobiles on this website, right? And if I try to go here and try to see all results, you will see hundreds of pages here supporting all of these searches that I have done. Now, my simple question to all of you is this: do you think that when this page, let's suppose this mobile phone page, when this page was created, do you think the developers in Amazon office, they have created all these mobile phones and all this data that you can see one by one individually? They have actually coded all of these things individually. What do you think about this? Because if you drag down, you can clearly see hundreds of search results, and all of the search results cards, their syntax, their layout is exactly same. You can see absolutely there's a title, there's an image, there's a stars rating, right, price, limited time deal, so on and so forth. But the real question that you should ask yourself is that all these 400 pages are all these search results, do you think Amazon people, do you think Amazon developers, they have created all these codes one by one individually? What do you think about that, guys? Absolutely not. Very good, right? So it is absolutely, although it is possible to design all these codes one by one, but it is not actually feasible. Why should we do that? Because it is same work in a repeated way. So the point, the conclusion that I'm trying to make you understand is that in this case, we have to understand we are dealing with lot of data, and the same data is fetched again and again. And we have just told it. This is how you have to design one item of data, and if you see rest of the item of data, please design them in the same manner. So this is something that we need to understand, that how do we deal with such kind of data which is located on somewhere else network, which is located somewhere else, maybe on another server, and yet we display it on our website, we fetch it on our website and then display it in a proper layout manner by not repeating the same task again and again. The first and the most important topic that we have to understand in today's class is what is an API. What do you think an API is? Because I think we might have done a discussion, small discussion, but let us try to jump a little bit inside it, and let's try to understand what we mean by API. And it's a very important interview question. Usually people ask a lot about API, so let's quickly try to understand what API is. See, we know that this course that we are currently taking classes of, this course is MERN, full stack development. We are currently in front end. We will definitely move towards back end as well if I see enough students joining. In front end, the most and the wonderful thing and the most difficult thing as well as the most easiest thing is to understanding APIs. And by understanding, I mean if there's an API, how do we get data out of it, and how do we actually map that data on our website? That's the most important thing in our front end. In our back end, our task as a back end engineer is very simple, that how do we design such APIs. So as of now, we will just use some APIs which are already created, some public APIs, free APIs on the internet, and we will create websites out of it. That's what we are going to do. We are going to create a very important project in which we will do a lot of functionalities, whether it's a search functionality, whether it's a pagination functionality, whether it is a favorite local storage functionality or not, or whether it is creating n number of cards continuously. That's what our project is going to be, hopefully in tomorrow's class. But in today's class, let's first of all try to understand what an API is. Okay, we all know that when we talk about APIs, it is application programming interface. That's what the full form is, right? But no one knows, although everyone, I would say, who has experience, they know what application programming interface actually is. But let's quickly try to understand what it is. Okay. Govinda is asking a very simple question, sir. Is front end easy or back end? I used to think front end is easy, but now I think after 4 years of experience, 5 years of experience, now I think back end is easy. So it depends on it. It depends completely, because front end you have to keep a lot of parameters in mind. You have to design, you have to put CSS. Back end is straightforward, simple logic, logical entities, and you have to create your website based on logical entities. So that's something that is very easy. That's what I find very easy for me as of now. Please make sure you like this video right now and you share this video in your college group, so that they can understand what promises async await and what APIs are. Let's quickly focus here. API, as it stands for application programming interface. The most important keyword, if you take here, is interface. Interface means something that's in between. We can say that in layman terms, we can say that which is in between. In between of what? Let me give a simple example. I always repeat the same example. Why? Because it's very easy to understand with this example. Let's suppose you have decided that you have to book a flight ticket or you have to book a movie ticket, whatever, right? Flight or movie ticket. What you have decided is you have few friends and you have decided that okay, we are going to watch a movie or we are going to book a flight because we have to go to Goa. Let's suppose one of your friend, they will try to book movie tickets on Paytm. Another friend, they will try to book tickets on, let's suppose, book my show, because these are the applications where we usually book our tickets from, right? If you remember, if you have ever done such kind of activity, you will see that this is the interface that you usually see. Like these are the seats available on that interface, on that user interface. Let's suppose I am trying to watch a movie on a cinema, and that cinema's name is X Cinema. Okay. And these are the seats that are available on that particular platform. Now, of course, Bookma Show represents the same movie hall. So we can all agree that over here as well, we will have the same interface. Why? Because both of these represent the same movie hall, same movie theater that we have. So let me create the same user interface for this as well. And when, let's take an example, me and Govind. So Adfar is on Book My Show, Govind is on Paytm, and we are trying to book our tickets. And let's suppose when Govind went here, these two tickets were already booked. Maybe some other people booked it. So of course, the same two tickets will be booked here as well. It's common sense, right? That's what we already have seen. Even if you are not developer, you will say you cannot book these two tickets, right? Very good. Now what has happened? Govind is little bit faster than me. He runs his fingers very fast than me. What he has done is he has actually booked these two tickets. After some time, he has not done the payment. What I have done is I have actually tried to book the same tickets. Now, after some time, Govind actually booked the tickets, right? He paid, he did all the stuff, whatever he paid via Google Pay or whatever he was supposed to pay through, he paid that, right? And on the same time, now I am on my payment page. Now my question is to all of you, that will I, Adfar, be able to book these two tickets, since these two same tickets of same movie theater, which is represented by same Paytm, Govind has already booked them. Will I be able to pay for these two tickets? If I do the payment, will there be an error, or will my Book My Show allow me to book same two tickets which Govind has already booked on some other platform? Will that happen? The answer is of course not, right? Of course not. Because these two tickets, since they represent the same movie theater, these two tickets, they represent the same movie theater, I won't be able to actually book these two tickets. Now the question here arises, how does Book My Show come to know that these two tickets have been booked? Because we all know Paytm is a separate business, Book My Show is a separate business. Book My Show application is a separate business, Paytm is a separate business, and they don't have any connection with respect to them. But how does Book My Show come to know that these two tickets have actually been booked by some other people? How? Because there's something common in between of them, and that is this particular X movie theater, right? That is this X movie theater. even though there's no direct connection between Paytm and Book My Show, but we all can agree right now. This set of arrangement of seats on Paytm, Book My Show, they both actually have a common point, which is X. Now, what X does is X actually shares data. X shares, always remember, it can be limited data, it can be complete data, depending on what actually is the design of this data sharing. Now, what X has decided is X has created a set of API, an interface that it has, which contains simply data. And based on that data, actually it shares some limited data, like how many seats I have available in me, how many seats are booked over there, and what is happening on this particular theater. So that's what the application of this interface in between is. That I will contain simply data, and whatever businesses require that data, I won't create the connection between those businesses directly, but this data point will be common in between, and that's how these businesses will share data and actually update themselves by making requests on that data point. And that data point is nothing but application programming interface. It is an API in between that behaves like an interface between multiple businesses. Now, my question, I said limited data. Now, when Govind booked these two tickets, now maybe Govind has booked it with his credit card. Do you think when Adfar is trying to do a payment, Adfar will say, "No, how can you tell me these two tickets are booked? Show me the payment receipt." Do you think Book My Show is going to show you the payment receipt of what Govind has actually paid? Of course not, right? Because that's not the data Book My Show actually is going to fetch from this application programming interface, from this data point which is in between. This Book My Show just needs one clarity, whether this seat is available or not, and then this payment details might be shared from Book My Show to the data point. But the point is, Paytm, whatever Govind has paid, Book My Show is not interested in that. Adfar, it cannot display such details to Adfar over there, because the data sharing over here is limited. So when, see, this is what happens. Let's suppose over here Adil comes and Adil says, I have to book this ticket. Now, when Adil clicks on this, a request from Book My Show goes to this API, an endpoint, an interface, a server that I have created on X. And Book My Show, when Adil book this ticket, will send a request and will just try to check whether this seat in between is available or not. And then this data point, this API is going to send back a request, and then we'll tell it yes or no, depending on whether this seat is available or not. So what do we have? We have something in between which carries, which transfers the data, which has the data availability, and depending on that, it actually determines some things. So there's already data created, and that's what APIs are. That's what we mean by application programming interface, an interface between multiple businesses or multiple things, in through which we simply have, on which we simply have data, on which we can add data, we can get data, we can update data, we can delete data, depending on the operation that we are interested in. So it's simply a data carrier, data server, nothing else. Am I clear? Do we understand what APIs are? Give me a quick confirmation over here. Yes or no? Yes or no? And in front end, what we do is we actually make requests, we try to fetch data out of this API. But in back end, we design our APIs. Like this API, it definitely might have some rules and regulations, and that's what we define and design in backend. So that's what we have backend for. Another very important example. When we talk about this Amazon application, don't you think when these cards are created, instead of creating these cards one by one, what actually would be the scenario? Might be the scenario that there is some server, on that there's an API, and on that API there's all the data that is created in a specific format only. Now it's not like this card will be in one format, then this card will be in another format, this card will be in another format. No, but all of these cards will be in the same format under that API. And now whenever you go to this website, it actually fetches data from that API and displays you the content. So instead of, when let's suppose tomorrow a new mobile phone comes up, instead of creating that card here, what I will do is I will actually add that mobile phone on that API. Since I have already written the code on this Amazon application that whenever any user comes to this particular web page, make a request that API and get data. So now there's a data already somewhere, and we simply write our code to fetch data, continuous set of data. So instead of designing all of this one by one, we have a data, we design one content, tell it, repeat it depending on how many data items we have inside our API. So each backend server have its own, depending on each server can have multiple APIs depending on what we do. And how to create an API, we will learn that in our backend. How to create data, what are the different rules and regulations that we have to keep in our mind, we will all learn them in our back end. As of now, the most important point is, sir, we understood what API is. Okay, we understood a small application of what APIs are, right? We understood. But the point is, what is the correct way of dealing with an API using JavaScript? That's one of the most important things. If you take an example, let's suppose I will take a simple example here. Let me try to get something here. Give me a second. I already have some APIs on this Google Chrome. You can see I have this endpoint. Okay. If you look at this official joke, I don't know what this is, but if I click on it, if I make a request on it, you can clearly see visible is got hang. Is my screen visible, guys? Is my screen visible? Give me a quick confirmation. I think it's visible, right? Perfect. Great. Okay. Video pause. No, might be there. Might be my face might not be visible, but I think this screen is visible, right? Huh. Leave my video aside. Let's not focus on that because I think there's some network issue which I will try to resolve later on. But let's focus that my screen is visible, right? Perfect. It's responding properly. If you look at this particular endpoint, you can clearly see whenever I make a request. Now, what do we mean by request? Whenever you go on any web page, let's suppose I will go on any web page called as www.google.com. So let me go on amazon.in or any other website. What exactly happens? Do you remember our first class of this entire MERN course? I told you whenever you type any URL inside the Google Chrome URL section, a request gets generated from your browser. Now, whenever we talk about requests, it depends. It can be a get request, it can be a post request, it can be a put, delete, and depends, right? But always remember, whenever you go on your browser and you write a URL here, it always makes a get request. What? Get request. Now, what do we mean by get request? What do we mean by put, post? All of those things will be defined later on. As of now, if I try to refresh my page, you can clearly see a lot of requests are getting created from your web application. See how many requests. Like on this JPG, it's making a request. On different endpoints, it's making a request. But if we look on www.amazon.in, if I click on it, you can clearly see the request method is get. It's trying to make a get request. Get means simply go to this endpoint, whatever data it holds, my intention is to read the data. My intention is not to update it, to change it, to delete. By simply I want to read, I want to fetch the data. That's it. There's no other intention that I have. That's what we mean by get as of now. Okay. So my point is, whenever I have written this particular API inside URL, this section, I have clicked enter. As soon as I did that, it will make a get request on it. So somehow I have to find a way that when I have to write some code in a particular manner, which will actually make sure that on this particular URL, I will be able to make a get request. Get request, because that's what browsers do. When you write URL in a URL section, it will make a get request. And you can clearly see when I click on enter, it makes a get request on this API, and every single time for a different get request, it gives a new joke over here, because that's what the data this API holds. Now we can see every single time it gives us a new joke. But the most important thing that you have to take from it is that every single time, even though the joke is new, but the format is same. Don't you think every single time it gives me an object with type, setup, punchline, and the general whatever, but every single time it gives me the same type of format, and that's what APIs actually have. That whenever you define an API, it will contain same format of data no matter what. But the most important thing over here is, and I have a simple question. Anil says, can you increase pixel 720p to 180? What does that mean? Are you asking about my video? I think my video should be now working fine. Is it? I think it should be working fine. Okay, now tell me quickly one thing. Have we any time in this entire course, because this is our 14th class on JavaScript, have we ever done any kind of request on my any API or any endpoint using JavaScript? Absolutely not. We have not. But there's one of the very important ways or methods which we actually use. There are two things that we can do, actually three, four things, but we will focus on two things. Number one is we can use fetch web API. There's a web API called as fetch. Second thing is we can use a module called as Axios, but it's an external. And let's try to understand, let's try to learn same thing. So what we will do is we will try to create a web application, a simple web application, in which there will be a button called as generate joke. Now, whenever you click on that generate joke, every single time on my web application, it should generate me a new joke, new joke, new joke. Basu says screen is stuck. Is it? I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing anything as of now. Let me try to open VS Code and I think it should work. Okay. Let's try to create a website called as joke.html. I am currently on my VS Code. Please confirm whether it's properly working or not. I think it should be properly working. Okay. Let's quickly pay attention. Quickly pay attention. I have a simple button. Okay. And on this button, what I have simply, what's happening here? Okay. So let me simply create a button. Okay. On this button, it simply says generate joke. Simple thing. Now let me try to go live with this particular web page, and let me try to divide my screen to two parts. Okay, pay close attention here. So it says generate joke. Now whenever I click on this, the idea, the funda is very simple. It should simply generate every single time a new joke. Now what is the end point? With help of which what we can do is we can get a new joke. This is the website. This is the API. So let me copy it. Now over here, I will simply write my JavaScript. Okay. Now the first and the most important thing is we have to understand how do we fetch data out of an API. As I said, there is one of the very important web API which we use called as fetch method. So let me simply define a variable and I will simply say where my data is equals to, I will use a method called as fetch, and inside this fetch, I will simply paste my endpoint. Now, remember one very important point. Whenever you use a fetch method, by default, it will do a get request on this API. By default. That's how it's mentioned. If you want to define a post request on this, or put or delete or any other type of request on an API, we will see that later on as well. And there's different syntax in that case we use. We implement method called as whatever method we want. But as of now, if you don't mention anything, if you simply use fetch, if you simply write API over here as an argument, it will simply make a get request. Like what exactly browser does, browser makes a get request on an API. That's what it will do. Now, as of now, I don't know what's happening, but I will console.log my data. Let me see what fetch will return. Don't you guys remember that whenever you actually write a function call in front of a variable, inside that variable, what will be stored? Whatever that function returns. So this data holds what it returns. So let me go to my web page back. Let's quickly go here and let's try to understand what we have. So let me quickly go here. Okay, and let's try to understand what we have inside our console. So let me quickly go into inspect and let's go to console. What do you see, guys? What do you see? This is what is very interesting. This is what is very interesting, which is promises. If you look at this particular syntax that we have, you can clearly understand there's one very important data structure that it returned called as promises. So what's the conclusion here? The conclusion here is that whenever we deal with APIs, it will return a promise. Whenever we deal with API, note it this point on your rough copy. We are making a request on an API, any type of request, doesn't matter. It will always return a promise. Now, you guys tell me, in our previous class, we have already discussed a little bit of promises. Have we not? Yes, we have. Tell me quickly, when we deal with promises, what are the things that we have to keep in mind? And even if I try to open it, you can clearly see it is promises which is fulfilled, which means that the API on which you try to make a fetch, you try to make a get request, it is resolving the promise. Now, if it is resolving the promise, how can we get data out of it? How can we get data out of it? Very good, Govind. We have to either resolve it. In order to resolve it, if we are able to resolve it properly, we will get data out of it. If it is not, then we will use reject wala case, and it's going to give us the error. But before I come here and before I deal with these promises, there's something else that we have to discuss, which is I will go back to promises and I will talk about few of the very important points here. Let's quickly focus and let's try to understand these things very importantly. Okay, let's repeat our entire promises, because I'm pretty much sure there might be few students who might be joining our class first time. What's a promise? What's a promise? A promise is nothing in our real life. When we make a promise with someone, it can have only two possibilities. Either the promise will be fulfilled or the promise will not be fulfilled, it will be rejected. I gave you an example. Please and please, if you don't know what promises are, please go to lecture number 23. In our lecture number 23, in last half an hour, we have discussed small introduction to promises. But let me come back and let's discuss this promises again. Okay. So promises is nothing. It simply is a data structure which deals with a type of scenario or asynchronous JavaScript when we are not sure whether the operation that I am trying to perform, whether it will be fulfilled or rejected. Now, in this case, if it is fulfilled, what are we supposed to do? If it is rejected, what are we supposed to do? That's what promises mean. So promises is a way of attaching our asynchronous handlers in present or in future without knowing what the operation is going to give us. For example, this API that we had here, when we try to make a request on this API, when I go here and when I click enter, you guys tell me, do you guys know that it's going to send you data? Are you guys sure that if I try to make a fetch request on this, 100% time it's going to give me data? Yes or no? Do you guys know? Of course not. You don't know, because it depends. Maybe this API is right now corrupt. Maybe whoever is the owner of this API, he has removed the API from the internet. Or maybe there are some network issues, or maybe there are some other issues. The point is, when I try to make a get request on this API, I am not sure whether I will get the data or not. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So in these cases, we have to be very much ready that if when I make a request on this, if I get a data out of it, what will I do? What am I supposed to do? If I do not get the data, if there's an error, what am I supposed to do in that case? So in both these scenarios, I have to be ready, and that's what promises for. So promises are nothing but a kind of a way with help of which we will attach our asynchronous handlers, asynchronous callbacks in future, depending on what the outcome of promise is going to be. Simple. That's what promises are used for. Now, let's make a simple example here in our VS Code. So let's quickly go here and let's try to quickly understand what promises are supposed to do. This data structure simply, I will use promise like this. So promise is equals to, I will simply use a new word. Now, why I taught you in previous class new keyword? It's because I told you that when you add a new in front of a function, it is supposed to return object. Don't you guys know that? Remember in our previous prototypes class, that is one of the very most important class of JavaScript. Please watch that if you have not, because we have discussed what new keyword is. Whenever in front of any function call, you put a new keyword, the same function now returns an object. It's a constructor of an object. And over here, we have one thing called as promises. Now we know it receives a callback function as an argument. And that callback function in turn has two more arguments. We have discussed that: resolve, comma, reject. Okay. Right. Now, maybe if you have not been familiar with promise syntax, let me tell you. whenever we deal with promises, it can have three stages, although two that we talk about, but usually there are three. Number one is resolve, number two is reject, number three is pending. Now, when I am trying to make a request until it resolves or rejects, I don't know what's going to happen until then. The stage of this promise is pending. So there can be a pending data as well, pending stage as well. Now, look at this. This is a simple structure, this is a simple syntax, that we have a promise, and to that we implement a constructor. So I know that if I try to console.log my promise, okay, so if I try to console this variable that I have and try to execute it, we can clearly see it returns nothing but an object. It constructs an object around this promise that we have. And we have discussed the same thing in our previous class. Even if I write greet over here, if I define a greet function and then call that greet function here, put a new keyword in front of it, over here it will be greet, and in between there will be the thing that it returns. Now, what is it going to do? The promise is going to return one of two, either reject or resolve. So I will simply tell it, please resolve. What is it going to resolve? Any data. Let's suppose the data is data resolve. Okay. Now, if I try to execute it, we can clearly see now this promise variable holds an object, and that object holds a string called as data resolve. So whatever it returns, whatever this promise returns, that is what will be wrapped inside an object that we have. Now, honestly speaking, let me give you a small heads up. I already started promises in our lecture 23. Then why did I start prototypes and all those things in lecture 24? Because I wanted to give you an idea like what this object actually means. And we have understood that particular idea when we understood what new keyword does in front of a function call. Yes or no? Yes or no? Give me a quick confirmation in the chat. Do we understand like why there is an object here and what is this data resolve doing here? Do we understand that? Because we have already understood what new keyword does. So it returns an object. Now, or even it can go over, it can either reject data, rejected, something like this. It can reject this. And in this case also, if I closely try to execute this, we can clearly see I still get a promise, and then it is rejected, and the data I am getting is data rejected. In both cases, it returns the object with whatever data, whether it's resolved or rejected. That's what promises are, simple. Okay. Sorry, give me a second. Okay. Now, we know that this variable that we have, it holds an object, and inside that object we have this data which is being resolved. Now, to extract the data from this promise, now to extract the data from that object, if you look at this console, you can clearly see promise data resolve, right? If I have to extract this data out of this promise, what is the keyword that I use? What is the keyword that I use? What is the keyword that I use? The keyword that I use is dot then. Very good. So I will simply go here and I will simply tell it on my promise, please implement dot then. Because I know if I want to extract the resolve data, the data that is being resolved out of it, I have to use an keyword called as, I have to use a method called as dot then. And I know it receives a callback function as an argument. So I will go here, I will go here, I will go here, I will go here, I will go here. And let's suppose I will simply say console.log adfer. Now, do you think it will print adfer? And if I execute, of course, adfer is going to be printed. Why? Because my promise is resolving. And I know on a promise, if it resolves any data, doesn't matter what the data is, dot then will be executed no matter what. Let's suppose I will reject it. Instead of resolve, I will reject it. And in this case, if I try to execute it, you can clearly see I'm not able to see adfer, which means this dot then did not execute it. It was not able to execute itself. Why? Because my promise is not returning resolve, it's returning reject. So this dot then on a promise will only be executed. This callback function inside this dot then will only be executed if my promise is returning a resolve, which we have already understood. Now, the most important point is, are we interested in this adfer? Or are we interested in the data that it is resolving? We are interested, we want to extract the data out of it. We are not interested in consoling that adfer. Why would I console adfer? Because my intention was that when I performed an operation, it returned a promise. Whatever data it resolved, give me that. And that data, if you want to extract from a promise, if you want to extract from the object it returned, we can simply pass that over here as an argument. So the argument inside the callback function of dot then is the data that is being resolved. So instead of consoling adfer now, if I console result, you can clearly see over here, we can clearly understand one very important point. It is data resolve. It is data resolve. What exactly the data that is being resolved? So when we try to console, if I try to console dot log this promise here, and if I try to execute, you can clearly see whatever the data it resolves, that is what is being returned under the object this promise returns. Now, the same data, if we want to extract it from that object on the same promise, we have to implement a dot then, and inside the callback function argument, we have to console it and we will get the data out of it. Simple as that, straightforward. Now, let's come back to this. When we talk about fetch method here, when we try to make a request on this API, we can clearly and we all can agree to one point. Inside our console, we actually got the promise, and the data that we had is pending as of now, although there is data. Now, if we want to look at this data, if we want to see what is this pending, what is the keyword I have to implement on this particular data, because data returns a promise. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? What is the method that I have to implement here? Because I know when I perform this operation, I am not sure whether I will receive a data or not. I am not sure whether it's resolving or not. But I am pretty much sure if it is resolving, what is the method that's going to give me the resolved data? And that is dot then, right? So on this data variable, on this data, since it's a promise, I know now whatever it is returning, I can implement dot then on it. And inside this dot, then I can simply go and pass a callback function like this. Now look at this. As of now, I will simply go say console.log adfer. Okay, please bear with me and pay close attention. You are going to resolve all of your doubts related to promises. Pay attention. Now I will go here, and inside this website that I have, you can clearly see I have adfer. Why? Because I know promise is getting resolved, because that's what we saw a few seconds back, that when I performed a fetch request on this, it was getting resolved. Promise is getting fulfilled. That's why dot then executed. But are we interested in consoling adfer, or are we interested in the data this particular promise returns? What are we interested in? Give me a quick answer in the chat. What are we interested in? Quickly tell me. Are we interested in consoling the adfer, or are we interested in when this operation got performed, what is it going to return? Very good. We are interested in data. The data this promise returns. Now over here, we know the data will be passed over here to this dot under the argument called as result, or you can call it anything because it's an identifier. You can name it X, Y, Z, result, response, anything. And let's try to console our result. So console.log my result. Console.log my result. Let's go here and let's try to quickly understand what we have. I don't know what I got here, but yes, I got a response. I got something. If you look at this particular console, there is something that I am able to console, I am able to see, which is an object, a response, which is an object. Response, and in front of it, there is this particular object. And we can clearly see whatever we have. But I don't know what this is, but yes, I got something, right? I got the result, although not the desired data. Why? Because this is the data that I'm expecting here. But I have a simple question. Although there's some other meaning to it, but let me try to, for now, make you understand it in simple terms. We have discussed JavaScript objects, have we? Have we discussed JavaScript objects? Right? When we talk about JavaScript object, this is how we write our JavaScript object. We write, let's suppose, type is equals to general, like this. We write over there setup, that is, we write whatever over here like this. We write age like this 12. But do you think when we talk about JavaScript objects, we actually write double quotes on keys as well? No, we don't. We don't write double quotes on keys. Absolutely, we not. So if you look at this, maybe you will say that this is a JavaScript object, but it's not. I mean, the original JavaScript object which we deal in JavaScript. This type of object, when you see both sides, key names double quoted as well, it's called a JSON object. What is it called? JSON object, which is called JavaScript object notation. Object notation. Now, this is nothing but a lightweight, very lightweight copy of representing our data. It's one of the best ways of representing our data in a very lightweight, way. Or we can clearly understand that this JSON, whenever we try to represent our data into JSON format, it becomes very easy for us to get data, to see data, to send data, and it's compatible with other programming languages and other devices as well, which we will discuss later on, because today's class is not for JavaScript object notation. But my intention, my conclusion is that if you look at this data, it is not JavaScript object. It is JSON object. Do you understand? Do we all agree to that? Of course, sir, we agree, because we can clearly see that it's not a JavaScript object. And if you look at the response that I got, remember one very important point. This response is what it's going to return whenever you fetch an API using fetch method. If the fetch method is implemented on an API, you are trying to fetch an API using fetch method. In that particular case, you have to understand, when we try to resolve it once, it is going to give us a response like this. But this response is not what we are interested in. We are interested in this response, but also this response is not what we are interested in. We are interested in this response, but in JavaScript object format, not in JSON object format. That is why we have to go here and we have to tell it the response that you actually go parse it. Parse it. Parse means convert it into a JavaScript object. Parse it. In order to parse it, we use a method called as .json. So I will simply tell it console.log result.json like this. That's the only thing that you have to remember, that whenever we use fetch method, although if I'm using Axios later on, I don't have to implement parse. It automatically parses. But right now, since I am using fetch method, we have to parse it. Parse it, because when we try to make a request on API, it gives me a JSON object, but that's not what we are interested in. We are interested in, and also they're not the response, but the JavaScript object. And when we parse it, it actually will give me proper JavaScript object. Now let's try to go to the console. Let's try to see what it gives me. If I go to console, you can clearly see it gives me promise again. So when we implemented .json on this result response that it gave me, when I tried to resolve it first time, what it returns me? What it returns me? A promise which itself is fulfilled if you look at this, and there's a data in it. Which means whenever I will implement .json on any kind of method, it is going to also return a promise. Now, if it returns a promise, we have to resolve it or reject it. And in order to get a data out of it, what am I going to do? I am going to use another dot then. So the most important point over here that we need to understand is that whenever we talk about any promises, we have to understand that we will not use promises in this way in most of the cases. Like 95% of cases, I'm not going to define promises like this. But whenever I have an API, this is an endpoint on the internet, and I am trying to make a GET request on it. Now, this operation returns a promise. And that's what we have to deal with using .then or .catch. Because those are the two core keywords that's going to extract data out of it if it is getting resolved or rejected. On the other hand, no, it's not necessary I will use just fetch. There can be any other operation which might return a promise. If you look at .json, what does it do? It parses the result into the JavaScript object format, which we are interested in, because we are interested in our data. So when I do result.json here, what does it mean? It means it returns a promise. And if it returns a promise, what does that mean, guys? Either we have to resolve it or reject it. Since we know it's getting fulfilled, what am I going to do? I am going to simply tell it to resolve. And how do we resolve it? Using dot then. Likewise, Mubashir. So I will simply tell it the first dot then method returns result.json. And I clearly can understand now this whole operation, this whole code itself returns a promise. Now, if itself returns a promise, don't you think I have to use again dot then here? And in this dot, then I will also receive a callback function like this, and I will receive an argument, whatever we want to call it. Let's call it response, and let me do console.log. So if I simply go say console.log, my response. See, let me quickly revise it because this is something very interesting and very important. When we fetch it, when we try to make a get request on this API, it returned a promise with some data. And when I try to first time resolve it, the result argument we actually got here, this was not the desired format which we actually are interested in. That's why we have to parse it because that's what the data we are interested in. So what I did is I implemented .json to parse it, to get the JavaScript object out of it. Now, when I implemented such operation, when I told it that implement this operation, it actually returned another promise. Now, if it returned another promise, I have to implement another dot then because I have to resolve it. Now, when I resolve it, I actually will get another argument. And if I go now to the web application, don't you think we exactly got our object? Don't you think we exactly got the data which we are interested in? Yes or no? Yes or no? Right? You can clearly see the API data which we actually can get here when I try to make a request on this. The same data I got inside the variable called as response over here under the dot. Then, of course, we got that. But look at this closely. Look at this console that we have. Please and please look at this closely. If you look at this, when we try to fetch an API here, we got JSON data because you can see even the key names are under double quotes, type under double quotes, setup under double quotes, punchline under double quotes. But on the other hand, when I implemented .json, when I parsed it, if you look at this, do we have double quotes on ID? Do we have double quotes on punchline? Do we have double quotes on setup or type? No. Why? Because it is a pure JavaScript object right now. And since it's a JavaScript object, I can put it in my website now. And this concept that when you try to resolve one promise, and while resolving the promise, it returns another promise, and you resolve that as well. This concept inside JavaScript is called promise chaining. What is it called? Promise chaining. It's one of the very important questions, even asked in interviews as well. Hey, explain promise chaining and give me an example of it. So when you perform an operation on an internet or on our web page or inside your JavaScript, it returns a promise. And while resolving that promise, it might yield another promise. And you have to resolve that as well. And you have to implement multiple dot-ins in a chain. And if such scenario happens, this concept inside JavaScript is called a promise chaining, a simple, straightforward concept. I hope this makes sense. Am I clear? Am I clear? Give me a quick confirmation, all the 30 students. Make sure you like this video right now and please subscribe if you have not already. And also, please share this with your friends and family. Please give me a quick confirmation in the chat. Quick confirmation. Done? Perfectly. Very good. Now, let's understand one thing. If you look at this variable and if you look at this website which we are trying to create, we all can understand, sir, we got our data from this promise under a particular variable inside that .gen called as response. But, that's not what we are interested in. Thank you so much, Mubashir. What are we interested in then? We are interested in one of the very important thing to display this data on our web page. This is what we are interested in. That when I click on this generate joke, over here, it should actually display a joke. That's what we are interested in. Now, you guys tell me, what is the functionality when we click on that button? When I click on that button, do this. Create a particular joke, display a joke. And for that, what is the what is called attribute we use? We use a event over there called as on click. So it simply tells this button that whenever this button is clicked on that particular case, call a function called as generate joke. So let me define a function like this, and let me remove all of this code here, and let me simply define a function called as generate joke. And whenever this function is defined, we can clearly understand now that whenever this button will be clicked, it will call this function, and when it calls this function, it's going to execute this code. And let me put this code here. Very good. After that, let me create a div, okay, with an ID, and that ID is going to be main. Okay, perfectly fine. And over here inside this dot, then since under this variable response, under this identify response, I get the data from this API, I will simply tell it. Over here, please do one thing, create a variable called as element. Inside that, on my document, since I have to now display the data on the website, and we know we have a model to deal with that, and that model is called a JavaScript object model. So I will simply go here, say document dot get element by ID, and over here the ID of that div is main. So I know if I go here, I will get now div element here, and to that div element, I will simply tell it, please make its inner HTML. So on the element that I have, please make its inner HTML. What? And let me use template literals. Why? Because I have to use JavaScript variables. That's why I have used template literals here. Over here, I will simply tell it, let's try to write h1, maybe h1 tag, or let's say h3 tag. And let me try to close this h3 tag. In this h3 tag, I will simply go and tell it depending on what my data is. So if I go here, let us see. So we have type, we have setup and punchline, and I'm interested in only two things, setup and punchline. So let me go here and let me simply say set up. And the setup is equals to dollar and then curly brace. Why dollar curly brace? Because I have to write JavaScript variable here, and JavaScript variable is response. If you look at this response, now what is this response? Let's quickly try to understand that. And let me say console.log response. Okay, let's go here in my console and let's quickly try to understand what this response is. If I go inside inspect, let me quickly open console. When I click on generate joke, you can clearly see that under this particular console, I can see an object. So do we all agree and can we all conclude that this response is nothing but an object that this API returns? Is it an object? And if it is an object, I have to access this key called as setup and punchline. So don't you think I will simply write setup response dot setup like this? Of course I can. Similarly, I will go create another h2, let's suppose, and inside h2 I will simply go write punchline space like this, and then dollar, and then simply I will go write response dot what response dot punchline, and let me close this h2 here. Now if I go in my website and if I try to open this website quickly, we all can clearly see as soon as I click on generate joke, it will give me a joke here which says setup is what kind of music do planets listen to, punchline is Neptune's. Okay, although these jokes are not that much funny, but yes, we created our website. Now if I again click on it, it will generate a new joke, which is how does a scientist freshen their breath with experiments, right? So these are some kind of jokes that it actually gives me, although I have written punchline. So let me try to make it punchline here. So punchline done. So I hope you have completely understood that whenever we deal with an API and it gives us data, and how do we deal with that? Please give me a quick confirmation in the chat whether we understood all those things or not. So generate joke, every single time when I click on it, it will call the API, call the function, return data, put it in h3 h2 tags, and we will get us our joke. So this is called generate joke application. Generate joke application, and this is the API that we actually use. So let me put this inside our chat as well, so that you can bookmark and then practice your promises around it. Practice, please practice as much as you can. That's the most important thing about promise, about web development. Practice, practice, practice. Right now, I have a simple question, and I'm expecting an answer. Simple question, a straightforward question, and I think you should be able to answer it. Depending, since we have been, discussing JavaScript now almost for 15 classes now. When you go to this web page, if I try to refresh this web page, we can clearly see by default there's no joke. There's no joke. By default, there's no joke. But that's not what I want. I want, even when someone goes to this web application, from the very beginning, a joke should be there. Huh? Then when you click on generate joke, even let me make the text on this generate new joke. When I say generate new joke, what does that mean? That means there's already a joke present. So how do I make that? That when anyone goes to this website, joke should be already there. So tell me quickly what change I need to make here. Quickly. Local server, why would I do that? It's not related. Understand the code, look at the code, understand the structure, and then answer, Rohit. Take 1 minute. Don't go with your intuition. Understand the code, understand the question, and then answer. By default, whenever anyone goes, then API should be called first. Give me an answer, like how do I do that? Whenever I go to this web page on the first time, joke should already be there. That's what my question is. Do you know why freshers fail in interviews? Like, even though you have the knowledge of things, you have the knowledge, but you are not able to answer. Why is that? Because you don't understand the question and then try to answer it in steps by step. You don't talk to yourself. Start talking to yourself. See, this is what the answer looks like to me. Okay, so Sarah has asked that as of now, when I click on this, a new joke gets generated. But Sir wants that whenever this web page is refreshed first time or whenever anyone goes there, joke should be already there. So let's first of all try to understand how am I able to get joke there. I am able to get joke because when I click on this, a function is called as generate joke. Okay, so why don't I simply go call my generate joke irrespective of my button directly inside my JavaScript? Okay, so if I call it here, which means when this is called, automatically it will fetch the data. It's going to execute all of this code, which means even if there's no one inside our, even if I'm not able to click on this, but generate joke is already called by default. So when I go to this web page, joke is already there. This is the answer. I will call my function directly because the function is responsible for calling the API. Functions. This is what we mean by functional programming. Am I clear? If you start talking to yourself, you will get an answer, but you don't do that. You directly come to an answer. Don't jump to answer. Don't conclude an answer. Think about it, talk to yourself, and then answer. What's the answer? The answer is, okay, this function is responsible for fetching an API. This function is responsible for putting the API content in H3 and H2. So why don't I directly call this function as a JavaScript directly inside this? So if it is directly put there, my solution is there. My answer is already resolved. My problem is already resolved, right? This is the answer. I hope this makes sense. So now if I go here, we can clearly understand that we are able to get our data even without clicking on this by default. Now when I click on this, it will generate a new joke. Can I watch the TV? Yes, but don't turn it on. These are the jokes, okay? Perfect. So I guess we can take a break of 10 minutes now, okay? And after the break, but also before that, I would definitely want you to test out something in this break. So I do have some other APIs. Yes, this one. Similar API. You don't have to do anything else. If you go to this API, although it's not working right now, I'm not sure why, please test this API out. Let me know whether this API is working or not. I have put it in the chat. Quickly give me a confirmation whether this API works or not. So if it's not working, it's okay. I will try to find the same API in different way. We will do that later on, but tell me quickly if this API works. I think this should work. It was working. See, this is what I mean. Right now, if you try to make a request on the API, it won't work. Why? Because it's not working. So it's rejecting the promise, right? So in this case, we have to be very ready. I hope that makes sense. And by the way, what is that keyword with help of which we can actually control our web application? Let me give an example. This is what I mean. If you go here, let's suppose this API, let's suppose someone have put something random here. I have put, let's say, Y here, which means now this API is not good. This API absolutely do not exist. So, of course, when I try to make a fetch request, will it return a promise resolved? Of course not. And now if I go to my website, if I go to my inspect, you can clearly see there's an error. Why is there an error? Because my API is not correct. The API that I try to make a fetch request, it's not correct. So how do we control this? I can control this using another keyword called as how do we make sure that even if our promise is getting rejected, how do we make sure our website properly works? In that case, how do we assign an asynchronous handler with that? We use a keyword called as very good. We can simply go here, say dot catch. And inside dot catch, we will also receive one argument called as error, or you can call it anything, whatever you want to call it. Error like this, like this, like this, like this. And I will simply tell it console.log my error. And now it has actually done one simple thing. I am able to properly catch the error as well. And you can clearly see it says that I'm not able to make a get request on this. It is responding with a status code called as 404, which is not found. Now, in our previous case, there were some errors here. If you look at this, if you look at the code previously, let me remove the error part here. And at this point of time, if I go to my website, don't you see these errors? Yes, we have this error, uncaught in promise, syntax error, so on and so forth. But now, when I try to properly catch the error, you can clearly see I am able to catch the error now in a proper manner. Perfectly fine. It's consoling me that error. Simple, right? So that's why we should always put dot catch as well, so that we can catch the error if there's any wrong thing happening in my operation that I'm trying to perform. So let me try to although remove it like this because it's a proper API now. I hope that makes sense. Please make sure if you have understood all these things which you have discussed until now, please make sure to put a like right now and share it already, and please subscribe if not. So see you guys after exactly break of 10 minutes. Let me create the timer of 10 minutes. So guys, see you exactly after 10 minutes. Also, do not leave the class. Sit here even in the break as well. And I'm expecting few doubts from you guys after the break. And we are going to discuss after the break async await keyword. Also, few of the very important concepts of promises. So do not leave. Stay here. Like this video right now. Share and subscribe. See you guys after exactly 10 minutes. Thank you so much. Bye. Hey guys, hi everyone, welcome back. I hope I'm audible as well as visible. Am I? Hello guys, allow me a second only, and then we are going to start our class. I hope I'm audible. Am I? Hey guys, hi everyone. I cannot see anyone typing anything in the chat. Only one student Ankit here, and the rest of the students are not. Please put something in the chat so that we can start our class. So we will wait 1 minute for rest of the people to join because I think there are a few people who have left for the break. And let's join back. Let's join back and try to start our discussion again. See, today's discussion is going is one of the very important discussions. Honestly, why? Because later on, when we will deal with backend, in that particular case, whenever we are going to fetch data, make any request, in most of the cases, it will be to deal with promises, right? So you have to understand that promises is the top most important topic or important concept in JavaScript. So please make sure that you are taking your notes continuously and you are trying to understand things in a proper way. I simply am going to ask you a simple, very simple question here related to promises. And this was asked to me 2 years back, and it's promise is a web API. Promise is not a web API. Fetch is a web API. Promise is a concept. Promise is something that it's a kind of a constructor, nothing else. So promise is not a web API. Fetch is a web API. Okay, now pay attention. I'm going to define something here. A simple concept. Let's say, let me try to comment this, and let me try to comment this quickly. And let's try to create a question, a very simple question. Console.log one. Very good. Then I will simply define a promise. So where promise is equals to, let's say new promise, and over here I know it's going to receive two arguments called as response reject, like this, like this, like this, like this. And over here, what it does, it simply console.log2. And then over, I will simply say, tell it to resolve. What resolve? Let's suppose hello. Okay. And then over here, I will simply go on my promise. I'm going to implement dot then. And over here, it's simply going to console.log my 3. Finally, I'm going to simply go say console.log 4. Tell me what will be the output, in what format, in what order, I mean. Quickly, quickly, guys. What will be the order of the execution? Like, will it be 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 4, 3, or 1, 2, whatever the order is? Don't give me separate answers. Write it one line. Write it one line. What will be the order of the execution in this case? Quickly. Pratime says 1, 2, hello, 3, 4. Okay. Anyone else? 1, 4, 2, 3. Okay. 1, 4, 2, 3. Okay. Anyone else? Pratime says 1, 2, hello, 3, 4. Okay. 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 Do we all agree to one point here? Because although I can see only 2, 3 people typing here, Anki says 1, 2, hello. Hello won't be there. First of all, hello will never be there. Why? Because I'm not consoling the result of dot then, right? The argument of dot. So hello will not be there. That's out of the discussion. There will be 1, 2, 3, 4 only. Yes, if I would have been doing something like this, I would have been passing argument here and then consoling this argument, then hello would have been there. So no hello. Hello won't be there first of all. Okay. But the point is, let's jump back to the definition of promises. Promises is something because of which we actually assign asynchronous handlers to what it's going to return, either resolve or rejected in future. पहले से ही. When we say we are going to assign asynchronous handlers, tell me which one is the asynchronous handler. Do you think this is the asynchronous handler which I have highlighted here? Yes or no? I need an answer. Do you think that this part that I have highlighted here, it is an asynchronous handler which we are trying to associate with the resolve part of the promise? The answer is yes, right? Yes, it is. So if it is an asynchronous, I know based on the discussion that we did in lecture 22 or lecture 23, asynchronous under the hood, we understood that all the synchronous code will be executed first, then the asynchronous code will be executed, right? Based on that discussion and based on that conclusion, tell me what will be the output. Now, very important point here. Do you think that this portion over here is synchronous or asynchronous? That's one of the most important points here. And that's why I got confused. When this question was asked to me, I was very confused, although I was able to answer later on. I was able to answer this question. But honestly speaking, it took me some time because there's one thing that I have learned in my life. In interviews, do not answer immediately. Think and then answer. Take time and then answer. There can be two possibilities only. I know that this is synchronous, this is synchronous. If these two are asynchronous, there's one point here, which is one will be executed first, then four. And then there will be a tug of war between this, right? But remember one thing. If I execute it, you will see two over there, two over there. This two, it is not actually asynchronous here. So it's 1, 2, 4, 3. The answer is 1, 2, 4, 3. If you look at this code closely, that's why the definition of promise is very important. Why are we associate asynchronous handlers? Asynchronous is this particular part, only this particular part. So this is not asynchronous in nature, right? Because unless and until this is not executed, how can you associate dot and dot catch here? This is one of the very important points and one of the very important interview questions. So if you ever receive your question, always remember dot and dot catch. Those are the asynchronous handlers that we're associating with the promise. Not the promise itself is not the asynchronous. Am I clear? Am I clear? That's why this question is very important, because usually I see people answering 1, 4, 2, 3 or 1, 4, 3, 2, but they treat both of these entities asynchronous. Asynchronous are the handlers that we associate with it. I hope that makes sense, and I hope I'm completely clear. Okay, perfectly. Moving forward, there are two keywords now. Okay, one of the keywords is called async, another one is called await. Now, those two keywords are asked 100% time in the interviews if you sit in a good job profile. That's why you need to understand what async is. Okay, let's understand. Always remember, first of all, even if you ask any fresher who knows what async, they will answer. Async is a keyword with the help of which we make a function asynchronous. Although I don't know, I don't see that. Absolutely not. That's not what my definition is. I look every concept in a different perspective, and I will give you my perspective on it. Okay. First of all, let's create a function. So what this function does is it simply, let's name it greet, and what it does is it simply returns good morning. Normal function. Very good, sir. It's a normal function. I don't know why people are leaving, because these two keywords are very important keywords. Async await. After that, I will simply go console.log and I will simply call my greet function like this. And I know from my JavaScript concepts, I know it's going to print good morning because I told you to print what it's returning. Now see, I will simply put async in front of it. If you remember our previous class, we understood that whenever we call a function, we can put new keyword in front of it, which makes it to return an object, which makes it to construct an object around that function, irrespective of what it's returning. But, and we put new keyword in front of function call, in front of a function call. Over here, we put async keyword in front of a function definition. That's one difference, first of all. Second thing is, async does not do anything wonders there. Honestly, trust me. Async is simply, it asks the function to behave in a different way. That's it. Nothing else. If you look at this function, it returns good morning. When you put async in front of it, it simply will make one change only it. Return promise. That's it. That's the definition. There's no other definition of it. Async keyword, when put in front of a function, will make sure now the same function returns a promise. So whenever we have a function definition, we put async keyword in front of it. The same function which returned in previously normal string, it will return now a promise. That's what async keyword does, nothing else. But sir, what does that async that function actually returns? The promise that it returns, what does it contains? We know in front of a promise there's an object. Now that object will contain the data what the promise returns, which is good morning. That's why if we execute it, you can clearly see it returns a promise with the data which is good morning. Simple. Do you think async keyword is some difficult keyword now? Of course not. Whatever my promise returns, it wraps that particular thing in a promise. That's it. That's it, nothing else. You will say, sir, it makes it asynchronous function. Zara, you tell me. If I go here, if I say console.log, let me say console.log1. If I go here, if I say console.log, let's push 2. And if I try to execute my code here, you can clearly see 1, promise, and 2. Do you think it makes it asynchronous function? Do you think it makes it asynchronous function? Because I told you promises are not asynchronous in nature. No, it does not make it an asynchronous function. It simply makes sure that it tells the function, instead of returning what you are supposed to return, do not return that, return the promise. That's it. I don't know why there's a confusion on this async keyword too much. Am I clear? Give me a quick answer in the chat. Whenever we have a function, whatever it returns, it wraps that particular thing in a promise. That's what we have. Simple as that. Now the question. Sir, I understood what async keyword is. And I think this is the most easiest definition that I have understood for async. And I don't know, sir, why others have made it too much difficult. Then I have a question, sir. What if the function does not return anything? In that case, what will my promise hold inside the object? As I said, as we already discussed in our previous classes, Sarji, if my function do not return anything, does it mean it does not return anything? No, it returns undefined still. It returns undefined still. And if it returns undefined, of course, it's going to have undefined right now as a data under the object. Basu says one doubt. Yes, please ask that. Do you understand? Do you understand? So that is the conclusion. Note it down on your rough copy. Async makes my function behave differently, which is async when put in front of a function definition, it will simply tell the function whatever you are returning, wrap that data under a promise. That's what we have. Simple as that. Let me come to that. Now tell me one thing. Let me get back my good morning here. Now you guys tell me one thing. If I execute it, it returns a promise here with a data called good morning. Now, don't you think you are actually interested in that data? Don't you think you are actually interested in that data? And if it returns a promise, how do we resolve that promise? How do we resolve that promise? How do we resolve that promise? We use dot then dot get, and that's what the asynchronous part of a promise is. So I can simply go here, simply say where my data is equals to what is equals, and I will call my greet function like this. And if I simply go here, let me print my data and let me remove this as console.log1 because it does not serve anything now. I will simply go and execute it. We can clearly see it is nothing but a promise. So on that data, don't you think I will be able to implement dot then now? Of course, sir. Why? Because it's a promise. And if I console.log my result, you can clearly understand one very important point, which is I am able to extract the data out of it. And that's what makes it asynchronous. The extraction part of that. By attaching asynchronous handlers to it. I hope that makes sense. Okay. Although there's one another funda behind it, which I will come in few minutes. It makes my things very easy to resolve and reject, which I will come in few seconds. I think async keyword is clear. All the 30 students, please type yes or no in the chat. Thank you so much, Ruhul. Thank you so much for that comment. Quickly tell me, guys. Am I clear with async keyword? And if it returns promise, we can resolve it, and we can resolve it using dot then keyword. We can extract the data out of it. Am I clear until now? I don't see. I will come to that, Basu, as I said. Although this is the asynchronous part of it. I have already answered it, but I will come to the different portion of it, different perspective of it in few minutes. But give me a quick yes in the chat because I don't see people active in the chat. I don't know why. There are only one or two people in the chat. All the 31, 32 students, please type yes or no. Okay, let me come back. Sir, if it returns a promise, if it makes my function return a promise, why is the necessity of it? What is the necessity of it? Like, what is the point of using async await? Although I have not discussed await. If it returns a promise, in order to resolve a promise, there's one another way. One another way. Let me tell you what is that way. I will define a function called as, let's say, I will simply say data. Although data is already defined, let's say extra, or let's say promise resolved, or whatever. Give me some name. Let's say it is function, result. Let's say result, function result, like this, like this, like this, like this. And I already know that this greet over there returns a promise in which I have a data called as good morning, and that's what I'm interested in. I want to resolve the promise. And I will also make this result function as async. Although let's not make it async as of now. I will simply go and try to resolve my greet. And in order to resolve this, I can simply implement here. I can simply tell it data dot then over here. And in this data, I will pass my response like this, like this, like this, like this, like this. And I will simply say console.log my res. And then I will simply go here, call my result function. So if I call my result function and execute it, we can clearly see I have good morning, which means I have extracted it. But even in this case as well, let me simply go say console.log1, and let me go here and say console.log2 here. We all can clearly agree over it. As soon as I execute it, it's 1, 2, good morning, which means this particular part is still asynchronous in nature. Of course, yes. And it makes sense as well because I'm using dot then over it, which is asynchronous in nature. But I will not use this way of executing, resolving my promise. What I will do is I will simply say where res is equals to data. Okay. And in front of this data, I will use a keyword called as await. What have I used? I have used await keyword. And also remember, await keyword cannot be used unless and until that function is async function. So I will simply go use async in front of it. And then over here, I will simply go say console.log my res. What is that? What does this await keyword do? Await keyword, the literal meaning of await keyword is wait until this promise is resolved. So await keyword, so it means now we have found another way of resolving our promise. It's not necessary I will use dot then. I can use await keyword with the combination of async and I will be able to resolve the promise wonderfully. Okay, sir, we understood what await does. So await, since it's a promise, I have simply told it wait until this promise is resolved and get the data out of it and put it inside response. That's what I have done. Now, what is the change? What is the difference between dot and await keyword? Yes, it is exactly like dot then, but behaves in a different way. But does the same thing. The application is same. If I execute it, you can clearly see 1 good morning and 2. You can clearly see 1 good morning and 2. What's happening here? Do you see any difference between dot then and await now? Do you see any difference between dot then and await? There should be. At least if you have not, think about it. I will give you 1 minute time and tell me in the chat what's the difference. Even let me for your for your easyability, I will go here and I will tell it data dot then, and over here I will pass res like this, like this, like this, and I will say console.log rees. Tell me one thing. Look at this. Executed 1 good morning, and 2. Right? What's happening here? What's happening here? Behaving in a different way? Of course, it's behaving. Let me try to comment this now. As soon as I commented, if I go back to my console and let me go here and let's try to execute. If I execute 1, 2, good morning, behaving different way. If I try to comment this now and then try to uncomment this, you can clearly see it behaves in a different way now. 1 good morning, 2. So what's the difference? Tell me quickly, what's the difference? Let me tell you. Whenever we use await keyword, await syntax sugar, what does that mean? Let me tell you what actually happens over here. Whenever you use await, what is the meaning? Wait until this promise is resolved. So it is going to make this synchronous asynchronous function behave like a synchronous function. So what it actually does is it simply tells it that execute this. Okay, then as soon as it comes up here, unless and until this promise is not resolved, unless and until this promise is not resolved, do not move forward. So when we talked about dot, then it is asynchronous handler attaching, which means it will be executed after every synchronous code is executed. But that's not what await does. Await makes it wait. Await tells it to resolve this promise here. Do not send it to callback queue and all those things because there's no callback associated with it. So it tells you to wait here and then move forward. Even if it takes 10 minutes to resolve, it will tell it to wait. Await is waiting. Wait unless and until you are resolved. Now, you guys tell me, do you think this syntax is difficult or this syntax is difficult? Which syntax is easy? Of course, await. If that is not promised, this too will not be printed. Absolutely, Prathimesh. Absolutely. Because that's what await does. We know async, it will simply, if I return anything out of it, it will return that in a promise. Done, we know. But what does await do? It resolves the promise. If it resolves the promise, it means that I am going to wait here. So the same code which was behaving asynchronously, it made it look like synchronous. Although remember, do you think call stack waits for anything? No, it suspends the execution, but you don't have to understand that as of now. You will understand that once you're experienced. It does not actually tell my call stack to stop. Let's suppose it takes 5 seconds. What does that mean? Does it mean it will tell my call stack to wait? No, it suspends the execution. That's something that you can understand later on. But as of now, I think you have understood the difference between await and dot done. And you have understood whenever we talk about await, it allows us to resolve our promise in a synchronous manner. It looks like a synchronous manner and it can be used only with async keyword. So async makes my function to return a promise, and await keywords with the combination of async will actually resolve my promise. I need a quick confirmation in the chat. I need a quick confirmation in the chat. If you are first time on this YouTube channel, please make sure you subscribe. Please do that because definitely I need subscribers. And from this today's class, I have not received any subscribers, so please make sure you subscribe the channel. Quickly tell me, guys. Done? Am I clear? Perfectly. If we have understood it, this is the function that we had. Yes, sir. This is the function that we had. Now we know we had resolved this promise using what? Using dot then dot. Guys, let's try to resolve the same promise using async await. So I will create one another file and let me try to copy this with joke copy. Let's say quickly and let me try to paste it here. Okay. So let me try to paste the file. Although let me try to rename it and let's say this is joke async. Okay, joke async.html. And let me remove the entire code here. And what am I going to do? I know I'm going to call an API. Now let me remove this. You guys tell me one thing. Whenever I fetch in any API, what does it return? What does it return? It returns a promise. It returns a promise. Very good. Which means this data is nothing but a promise. Even we can check that. So console.log my data. And let's quickly go live with this particular file. And if I go live with this file, you can clearly see that inside my inspect console, we can clearly see it's a promise. Now, if we want to resolve the promise, we know it's fulfilled. We have to get data out of it. Now, if we want to fulfill that, if we want to get out data out of it, what is the keyword that we use? We use dot then. But I don't want to use dot then. I want to use async await. I want to use async await. Now, tell me what am I going to do? In order to resolve, since I know data is nothing but actually a promise, I will define, let's suppose, var. I'm going to say res is equals to what? Is equals to await. Await what? Await my data. Yes or no? Or instead of that as well, don't you think I can use await directly because I can use await here directly? Of course, I can use await directly because I know fetch is going to return a promise. And to resolve that promise, I'm using await here. But can I use await without async? Of course not. I have to make it async function. So I will make it async function like this. So now I have told it to please and please go here and implement await, which is fetch, and it will resolve it. Let's try to go there and console.log data now. Done. Simple cheese. And if I go now to the output, we can clearly see now we got the response. That's how easy it is. Remember in our previous example, when I actually implemented over here console.log under this dot, then it gave me this response which I'm getting right now. Of course, yes. Now, by just implementing await over here in front of it, it has actually resolved the promise that we have. Right? Am I clear? Done. Now I know that the data that I actually have, I have to parse it, which is exactly what I have to do, which is .json, right? Now, in order to implement .json on it, I will define another variable. Let me name that whatever variable. So JSON data is equals to, I have data.json. Now, if I try to console my over here, the same data which is resolved over here, I have implemented .json on it. And if I try to console.log my JSON data, if I go to my web application, you can again see promise. You can again see promise here. Now, if I try to resolve the promise, what is the keyword that I have to implement in front of this? Quickly tell me. So what am I going to use over here? I am going to implement await here to resolve this. And now if you look at this console.log JSON data, and if I go here, I got the data. Now you guys tell me that in order to fetch now, what is the easiest way? I'm not saying what is the absolute way or the necessary way. I will talk about that, Oscar, in a second. What is the easiest way? Of course, the easiest way is not this. Easiest way is this. But this will make it behave like synchronous, and that's asynchronous. Sometimes asynchronous is the need. Am I clear? Am I clear? So async await is straightforward way. Dot and dot catch is some funda, some too funny way. So Oscar says async await is always the way to go. Not always, but I understood the point. Or still there are some use cases when we need to implement promises. First of all, you need to understand async and await behavior. Async and await behavior. Let me tell you one other thing here. Let's suppose over here, this is async function, right? This is async function. Let me, instead of saying, let's say one thing here, I will simply go and tell it one thing, which is console.log, and let me tell it one, or let's say adfar here. After that, I will go here, I will simply say console.log, let's say Rashid here. What have I implemented? I've simply told one thing here, which is I have adfar console here, then there's a async function, and then there is, I'm calling the async function, then there's Rashid. What do you think will be the output order here? If I execute it, we can clearly see adfar, then one, then Rashid, then good morning. Try to understand what's happening here. Look at this code. Let me try to remove this so that you can see all of the code in one line. This is my code from here to here. Just pay attention until here to here. And look at the output that we have now. Ask Oscar, especially to you. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. First of all, it is printing adfar. And then it's simply calling the function, right? Because that's what the order is. Because I know functions from here to here, they will be ignored. Functions only work when you invoke them. And then they call result. Now over what's happening, it is actually console.log 1, and 1 is being executed. After that, if it is completely synchronous, don't you think it should actually print this thing first, which is good morning? But it's actually printing Rashid. That's why I said that when I implement await, it actually suspends the execution of that function. So it, for some time, it suspended the execution of this function. That's why we got Rashid and then good morning and then 2. Try to understand what's happening. It does not mean, okay, unless and until this is not resolved, do not execute rest of the code. So it is not synchronous completely. It suspends the execution of the function it belongs to. That's why it came out of the function and it actually executed my Rashid and then good morning and then 2. Am I clear? Do we understand what's happening here? Yes or no? Am I clear? Give me a quick confirm in the chat. You go on any documentation, it's nowhere mentioned that it makes it synchronous. It is written, it makes it feel, behave like synchronous. Am I clear? So if your necessity is like that, then you should use async await. And nowadays, everyone is using async await. everyone is using async await. Let me tell you what's happening here. Okay, let me tell you what's happening. Since it's a little bit complicated, but let me give you a theoretical view of it. See, I have n number of, or even let's not have n number of line codes. Let's talk about this. I know, let's leave rest of the code here and let's think that we have only this much of code. We know all about global execution context. We know how it executes its code line by line. We know everything. So it's going to execute this code, line of code. So one will be printed in the output. Very good. Then it will simply ignore from here to here because it's a function. Doesn't matter whether it's async function or not, but it's a function. So it's going to ignore this code and it's going to come here. Since it's an execution context, what's happening? What's happening? Since it's a function call, what's going to happen? It's going to create function execution context, which means it will go and give control to this function. My call stack was like this. There was global execution context, anonymous. And then since the function invocation is here, my control will be in result. Very good. Now, once my control is in result, it's going to execute this code line by line. Now, when it goes here, it executes this line of code. So first it executed this. So adfer was printed there. Then it, since this function is being called, it's going to print one here. Very good. Now it comes up here. It looks at this. And it sees that there's a keyword called as await. Await means wait. The await keyword is simply about waiting. It means it is telling it wait until this promise is resolved. But does it mean while it is waiting, it will actually tell my call stack, hey, stop for some time, stop execution for some time? No, call stack does not wait for anyone. Note that point down on your rough copy. Call stack does not wait for anyone, doesn't matter who that is and what that is. Simple as that. So what it does is, for some time being, since it's waiting, it's going to suspend the execution of this function. Since it suspends, where will my control go back? My control will go back to the anonymous global execution context, which means it will come here. And that's why it is going to print Rashid. Now it prints Rashid. What does it do? It will, since it has suspended the execution for some time, it will go back. And while it goes back, now it prints this and prints this. That's why you can clearly see this kind of execution order. So await keyword simply means one small thing, suspend, wait something. Ruko zara. And that's what it means. So control C, control V, control V. Let me even put a lot of Rashids here. And let me try to execute. If I execute, you can clearly see Rashids are being executed and good morning here. So it means this sum means suspend the execution, then execute. Now also, when these Rashids are being executed, it does not mean from here it will execute just two Rashids and go back. No. Call stack will not give the control immediately. Call stack will execute, because that's what it's going to do. It's going to execute these and then send control back. So until this await is going to be executed, until then all the code inside this will be executed properly. That's why you can clearly see 1 1 1 1, then Rashid, 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 and good morning and two. Am I clear? This is what await does. This is the real meaning and real execution, how await actually resolves the promises. If your intention is like that, see, now when will I use await? When will I use await? Sir, why? When will I use dot and when will I use await? That's the most important question. When am I going to use dot then to resolve a promise, or dot await, await to resolve a promise? Whenever I have a function, and inside that function, there is some code which I want to execute before this promise is resolved, I can use await. Or even if my intention is to make things readable, I will use dot then await, this async await keyword. So it entirely depends on our requirements. It's not like since async await is there, now I'm never going to use dot and dot. No. It depends on your requirements. No, both do not work same. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Dot then will always be executed after every single synchronous code is executed. They behave exactly like call by queue mein unko bheja jayega. Then event 2 will bring them in call stack. That's always. Await works. It suspends the execution for some time. I hope that makes sense. Now we will say, sir, no, sir. They behave in the same way. Let me tell you. Let me simply say over here, I will go say data dot then, and over here, let me first of all erase everything around this. So I have over here dot then and let me go say a response, or instead of saying response, let me simply console.log, and let me simply say subscribe variable verse, and let me remove it and let me execute. Do you think now good morning in between or good morning subscribe variable verse at the end? So there's a difference. So both are not seen. Do you see the difference, Rohit? You can see that when I implemented dot then here and resolved it, it will execute it at the end, no matter what. But on the other hand, the same thing which I have here, if I try to resolve the same promise using async await, let me try to implement using async await, you can clearly see now my good morning is not at the end but before two, and that was not the case here. So subscribe variable verse was at the end. So there's a difference in execution as well. I hope this makes sense. And I hope you have understood that it is for readability, for resolving our promise in a far better way. This makes a better case here, async await. Resolve it in easier way. But it depends on execution. See, the point and the difference is how they are executed. So if you are able to understand how they are executed, you are actually on good path. If you are not able to understand how they are executed, then either use dot and dot. It's one of the same things, or async await. It's one of the same things. The answer and the difference entirely lies in what? Entirely lies in execution, how they're executed. Now I have a simple question. Do you think that my function, my async keyword, sorry, I will never use it without await? No, I can use it without await. Async keywords is only one agent to make function async, to make function return a promise. With whatever that function returns, wrap that data inside a promise. I hope that makes sense. Am I clear? Am I clear, guys? Give me a quick confirmation in the chat. Give me a quick confirmation. Let me share the address form in the chat in the meantime as well. So in today's class, we have understood two things, and try to note these points. Try to note these points. The first and the most important thing is that whenever we talk about promises, it's not always, even very minimum 1 or 2% times we will use promises in this format, which means we will use promise constructor like that. But in most of the cases, whenever we talk about promises, promises will be used while performing an operation. Like we fetch an API, we fetch data, we make a get to guest, post to guest. Another example maybe, let's suppose you have to find, you are simply, let me give you an example. You have a website, okay? You have a website. You're trying to log in. Now you have written your email here and then password, and you click on login. Now, when you click on login, what does that mean? That means make a request on the database and find on the database whether there exists any user with this email or not. Which means over here there's an ambiguity of whether this user exists or not. And if user exists, give me that user. So you have to extract the data out of it. Whenever there is such kind of cases inside your operations, you need to understand we have to deal with promises. So it means in most of the cases you have to deal with promises. Don't you think that? Right? Full stack web application, you deal with backend. You make a request on the backend. You try to fetch the data. You try to update the data. You try to delete the data. Update profile picture. Get the profile picture. Update my DOB. Write these as my skills. So it means every single time, whenever you go on a website, you try to deal with the backend. Now, backend is a simple example, a single example of understanding why promises are too much important. So go over there and try to understand such kind of functionality. Another thing, you saw an example of Amazon. The same card is created 100, 200, 300 times. So instead of creating those cards one by one, why don't we put it in an API and then make a request and get data out of it? So it's all, promise is all about extracting the data in a proper manner. And in order to extract the data, we use two keywords, dot and dot catch, purely. But they both are asynchronous handlers that we're attaching with our promises. Second thing is we make our function async and we use await to resolve our promise, which means it will suspend the execution of a promise for some time. So please and please join tomorrow's class. The reason is tomorrow we are going to create a web application based on an API, GitHub API. So we are going to create something. It's not about creating application. It's about understanding promise in a far better way. Creating a web application based on API. So we will create a web application where we will fetch data in a proper manner. We will implement pagination. We will implement search. We will change the different parameters of API in tomorrow's class. Tomorrow's class will be completely dedicated to a project. So whatever time you are comfortable with, tell me the time, but make sure you all join, no matter what. Okay. So I hope today's class have been completely good. I have a small request, which is that please and please put a comment in our what's this called this YouTube video after this class is done. I do not see any comments. Like if you think I am giving you the best content or I am making some effort related to this, I think in my respect, I deserve a comment, right? And also, we have started a series of questions, interview questions every day on Instagram as well. And unfortunately, I do not see anyone commenting. I'm not sure why. So please and please do that. Otherwise, I'm going to close that series. There's no point. I am doing that series. I am doing creating that series on Instagram for you. And if you are not commenting on that, if you are not practicing those questions and then give me answers, then what's the point of that series? I will close that if that is the case. I have launched the question yesterday. I want all of you, Rohit, Chakresh, Arka, Shubham, Basu, every single person, Oscar, to put a comment there on our Instagram reels. Answer those questions. Also, please put a comment once this class is done. Please, 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 please do that and share this YouTube channel with your friends as well. Thank you so much, guys. Rohit, we will do that. We will do that in tomorrow's class. We're going to understand a proper example in tomorrow's class, create a project, and where we will explain all these things as well. But I don't see Shubham you commenting there. So if you are not commenting there, why would I keep it there, right? So please, please comment there. Share those questions with your friends. I don't see anyone sharing anything. See, at least you can do that now. That much for me, right? At least I deserve that, right? Please do that. Thank you so much, guys. Bye, everyone. Have a great weekend ahead. I hope you have understood the things. This class has been very important to you. Please, thank you so much for joining today's session. See you in the next class. Bye, everyone. See you.